There are films that entertain, and then there are films that endure. Galaxy Quest belongs firmly in the second category, and the story of how it came to exist, and how close it came to being something else entirely, is almost as remarkable as the film itself. What audiences saw in 1999 was a warm, funny, and surprisingly affecting adventure. What they didn't see were the disputes, disasters, and deliberate creative choices that shaped every frame of it. The concept seemed deceptively simple. Take a group of burned-out actors, famous for a beloved science fiction show they've long grown to resent, and thrust them into a real version of the adventures they've spent years pretending to have. But from the earliest stages of development, the people making this film understood that the premise had to evolve as the story progressed. The opening convention scenes establish characters trapped by their own legacy, going through the motions of careers they've stopped believing in. It's played for laughs, but the emotional groundwork is laid with real precision. As the story shifts from satire to sincere adventure, the film quietly stops winking at the camera and begins playing everything straight. That transition from cynicism to sincerity is what separates Galaxy Quest from virtually every other spoof of its era. Before any of that could happen, the production nearly fell apart over a single casting decision. Director Harold Ramis had a specific vision. He wanted Alec Baldwin in the lead role of Jason Nesmith, believing his theatrical intensity was right for the character. The studio wanted Tim Allen, whose broad comedic appeal made him the more commercially attractive option. Ramis couldn't reconcile the two visions and walked away from the project entirely. Dean Parisot stepped in, Allen was cast, and the film that followed was warmer, more earnest, and more comedic than Ramis had envisioned. Looking back, the version audiences ultimately received owes its entire identity to a dispute most viewers never knew happened. The casting conflict had a second consequence that proved equally fortunate. Ramis had a firm policy against casting actors with strong existing associations with science fiction, fearing they would pull audiences out of the film's carefully constructed world. Sigourney Weaver, whose identity had been shaped significantly by the Alien franchise, was blocked from consideration as long as he remained attached. When Ramis departed, that restriction left with him. Parisot approached Weaver without hesitation, and she brought a quality of self-aware comic timing to a role that could easily have been thankless. The film is measurably better for her presence, which makes the original obstacle one of the production's more fortunate accidents. The creative spark behind the screenplay itself traces back to an unexpected source. Writer David Howard has spoken about how observing Leonard Nimoy, and how complicated his relationship with the role of Spock appeared to be, first planted the seed for the story. That observation grew into a larger exploration of fandom, identity, and what it means to live in the shadow of a character the world refuses to let you leave behind. The tension between resenting a role and finding real meaning in it runs through the entire film, giving it an emotional depth that pure parody rarely achieves. Production itself brought its own set of crises. A significant portion of the main set was covered in mylar, chosen for its reflective, futuristic appearance. Under the intense heat of studio lighting, it began warping, bubbling, and pulling away from the surfaces it had been carefully applied to. The crew scrambled to manage the damage while filming continued around the chaos. The finished film gives no indication of the ordeal, which is perhaps the best testament to how well the production recovered from what could have been a catastrophic setback. An earlier version of the film carried a significantly darker tone, with sharper edges and adult language that pushed it firmly into R-rated territory. During editing, the studio intervened, concerned about limiting the potential audience, and pushed for cuts and re-recorded dialogue that brought the rating down to PG. Some replacement lines were dubbed in post-production, and careful viewers have noticed moments where the actors' lip movements don't quite match the words being spoken. The most frequently cited example involves a frustrated outburst from Weaver's character where the substituted word is fairly obvious to anyone paying attention. What's remarkable is how little the film's personality suffers from the change. The warmth that replaced the sharper edges arguably served the story better, allowing the emotional beats to land without cynicism undercutting them. Some of the film's most effective creative choices were entirely accidental. The oath spoken by Alexander Dane throughout the film, melodramatic, absurd, and delivered with theatrical solemnity, began as a simple placeholder inserted while the writers searched for something funnier. Nobody could find anything better. Cast and crew kept laughing at it during readings, and it stayed in the script by default. Alan Rickman, who had a gift for extracting maximum effect from minimum movement, delivered it with such committed seriousness that the joke deepened every time it appeared. What nobody anticipated was how that repetition would pay off emotionally. By the time the line appears in its most pivotal scene, spoken not as a joke but as a genuine farewell, audiences who had laughed at it multiple times found themselves caught completely off guard by how much it meant. A throwaway placeholder had become the emotional centerpiece of the film's most powerful moment. Rickman's contribution extended well beyond that single line. From his earliest work on the character, he pushed back against any interpretation that reduced Alexander Dane to a one-note comic figure. He insisted on treating the character's frustrations as genuine, his dignity as real, and his emotional journey as something deserving complete sincerity. The cast has spoken warmly about how his seriousness gave them all permission to go further than they might have otherwise. His presence elevated every scene he appeared in, and his influence on the film's overall tone extended far beyond his own performance. Tim Allen made a choice in building his character that surprised people then and still surprises them now. The obvious assumption was that he had studied William Shatner and built his performance from there. In reality, Allen has spoken about looking elsewhere entirely, specifically at Yul Brynner, whose regal, almost imperious commanding presence in films like The Magnificent Seven felt closer to what the character actually needed. Where Shatner's style leans into earnest intensity, Brynner projected something more architectural. A man who occupies space as if it belongs to him by right. That quality gave Nesmith a foundation of authentic authority that makes his eventual transformation from parody figure to genuine hero feel earned rather than convenient. Tony Shalhoub constructed something equally deliberate from a different direction entirely. While his castmates played panic, ego, and existential crisis, he built a character defined by an almost pharmaceutical sense of calm. The decision was to have Tech Sergeant Chen respond to every new crisis, alien encounters, teleportation, and near-death experiences, with the same mild, slightly distracted equanimity. The contrast alone is consistently hilarious. The near-constant snacking that became one of the character's defining traits wasn't scripted in detail. It evolved as Shalhoub found ways to express a man who remains grounded in immediate physical pleasures regardless of the chaos surrounding him. The visual storytelling operates on details most viewers absorb without consciously registering. The film uses two distinct aspect ratios, switching at a carefully chosen moment. The transition occurs when Jason Nesmith first approaches the bay doors of the ship and looks out into actual space. Up to that point, the film has been operating in a narrower frame, grounded and earthbound. The moment he crosses into the reality of what's happening, the image expands. Few audiences notice it in real time, but the effect registers emotionally even when it doesn't register consciously. The design of the spaceship itself was shaped by copyright attorneys rather than any single art director. From the earliest stages, the filmmakers were acutely aware that their fictional vessel could not bear too close a resemblance to a certain iconic ship from a competing franchise. Lawyers reviewed design drafts and flagged anything that crossed into legally problematic territory. The production team worked creatively within those boundaries, and the ship's registry number was quietly noted in production materials as NTE, standing for Not the Enterprise. What could have been a frustrating legal obstacle became a design challenge that pushed the team toward something more original. The Thermian aliens required more than costumes and makeup to feel believable. Enrico Colantoni developed their distinctive vocal quality during an early audition, drawing on a technique that produced a reedy, slightly breathless sound from an unusual position in the vocal tract. Director Parasat recognized it immediately as exactly right and asked every actor playing a Thermian to study and replicate it. The result is one of the film's quieter technical achievements. Every Thermian sounds like they belong to the same species, not because of post-production processing, but because a group of actors learned to produce the same unusual vocal quality by ear. The actors also underwent a period of movement training they nicknamed Alien School, practicing the elimination of natural human fluidity to give their physicality something genuinely non-human. The pig lizard creature was built primarily as a practical creation rather than a digital one, with a performer inside the suit providing real physical weight and organic movement that digital creations of that period often struggled to replicate. Mechanical components handled facial expressions and specific movements, while digital enhancement was used only where practical methods reached their limits. The decision reflects a broader philosophy running through the production. The best way to make an audience believe in something fantastic is to give them something real to respond to first. The visual effects, more broadly, were taken completely seriously. Industrial Light and Magic handled significant portions of the film's effects with the same standards they brought to productions with no comedic dimension whatsoever. The production understood something many spoofs miss. Comedy that exists within a credible world is significantly funnier than comedy that exists within a sloppy one. That commitment to genuine quality rather than ironic cheapness helps explain why the film's effects still hold up decades later. The science fiction community formally recognized what the film had achieved. It won the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation in 2000, voted on by the community itself, becoming the first and for a long time only comedic film to receive that honor. Patrick Stewart admitted to laughing so hard during his first viewing that he had to leave the theater to compose himself. Wil Wheaton declared it the best Star Trek movie ever made, a statement he has stood behind in every interview since. These were not polite endorsements. They were genuine expressions of recognition from people who understood precisely what the film was doing and appreciated the craft behind it. Galaxy Quest endures because it understood something most parodies never figure out. That the best way to honor something is to take it completely seriously. Every creative decision points toward a production that genuinely believed in what it was making. The jokes land because the film means them. The emotional moments hit because the film earned them. It arrived looking like a lightweight comedy and revealed itself to be something far more considered, a film that loved science fiction deeply enough to understand it, and understood it deeply enough to make something that will last.